G'day everyone. This devlog, what started as a learning experience, has snowballed into an offshoot game that I've been having a great time developing lately. Let me show you around. So, welcome back to another Sanctia devlog. I'm sure the astute among you have worked out that what you see here is not Sanctia, but something entirely different. If you're new here, g'day, I'm Jake, and I'm that get me arrested. G'day, I'm Jake, and I'm fumbling my way through game development, one section at a time. Last we left off, I was supposed to hit the books and learn how to use blueprints in Unreal Engine, but I got distracted. Surprise! So I ended up starting a new project. In this video, I'm going to go over what the project is and why I'll be doing it for the near term. So it's been a while since I uploaded last. I've actually got a good excuse this time. I moved over the new year and I haven't had much of a chance to do any recording for the devlogs. This is why this devlog also doesn't have a camera attached to it like all the other devlogs had. If you've been following me on Instagram, which is unlikely since I only have 3 followers and one of them is my mum, but I feel important when I say that, you may have noticed that I was posting a lot of little buildings. These have been the assets that I have been making for my new project, Towers and Towers. Now, what is Towers and Towers, all 3 of you might ask? Well, Towers and Towers is a hybrid RTS tower defense game with freeform building and waves of enemies. So, how did this start? This originally started because I made a little town simulation as it was a very literal way to learn how data gets moved around in Unreal. I then extended it to have a few enemies, broke it horribly, and started from scratch. But you can see from here, if we hit play, we'll just make it a bit bigger, that you have the basic controls to be able to build things. You have resources and a production rate, and as things get built, not enough gold, as things get built, it lets you gather resources and then you spawn a wave to fight. And these are the waves. And I broke this so now I can't get to the towers, but this is the general premise. After breaking it horribly, I needed to rebuild the project. So I decided that I wanted to keep it simple enough that all of the assets that I would create would allow me to very quickly iterate and test different systems inside of Unreal. So for an art style, I kept it simple with assets that can be built really quickly, but are flexible enough that it won't be hard to add more assets in the future. This means that I wanted to avoid things like normal maps and unique textures as much as possible. This is kind of a learning project and I know how to make full textured assets, so that would just slow me down. For the most part, each of these buildings takes me under 3 hours to make, in most cases much less. Here is the roadmap of what I'll be working on for the next little while. I've set this up in Notion so that I can better manage my tasks and make sure that I focus on each system and get it built out to a good level before moving on to the other one. It might be overkill for just little old me, but I have the attention of a 2-year-old. So if I don't do something like this, I just work on random shit that I find interesting at the time. So currently I've completed the basic environment, created the basic systems, and then we are starting on the more advanced systems. By the time this advanced systems section gets completed, the core game loop will be done, or at least in a testing phase. I know that most people will want their core game loop to be implemented much earlier on, but this was more of a learning opportunity for me in terms of how to technically implement these systems in Unreal rather than develop a proper game ideation loop. So once this is completed and the core game loop is in, we can start doing that iteration and making sure that it's fun. So let's jump back into Unreal and I'll show you where I'm up to. Like I was saying before, you can build in the town center. You can build numerous town centers, which will probably change. The only two in this version, the only two buildings I have implemented currently are the town center and the hovel. But we can rotate, build, it does its tracking. Let's build one more. There. And then a similar sort of thing can happen here. So I've got an arrow tower that will fire at these enemies that are spawning. Currently there's no collision set on the buildings. I don't know whether I want to set collisions on the buildings because that means that players would be able to barricade the pathways. So what I might end up doing is having a pathway through, having pre-built pathways that you cannot build on. So that means that at the very least the enemies will have a path to traverse to get to the gate. Eventually building destruction will also be something that I'll implement, but currently it's not built yet. All of these buildings are being built based on a single data table. So you can see here that I have all of my costs and the meshes and the size of it based on the data table. And then this is the basic blueprint for the building, of which you have a few tick events, but both the civilian buildings and the town buildings, which you can see based on the production rates over here, are also all of the combat buildings are all in one blueprint. I experimented and went back and forth between having a blueprint for the town buildings and a blueprint for the towers, and ended up settling on having them all in one just so that it is easy to keep up to date, and also it allows me to have buildings that maybe sometime in the future that can both attack and also produce resources or anything along those lines. It keeps it much more flexible. What else do I have to show? That's probably about it at the moment. I've got a very simple basic AI, which is just going from a spawn point to an endpoint. That will be one of those things that I'll have to work on. So as a leftover from the original way that I implemented this, these are how you currently build the buildings by clicking on this. Eventually it will just be a keyboard click to bring up a menu, and then depending on which side of which extent, at the moment this wall is creating the extent of the town. Depending on where you build, it will be red or blue for being allowed to be built in those sections. So yeah, that's where I got up to. So up next I will be adding in probably doing the enemy AI again, and adding in a health system so that I can complete that core gameplay loop, and start adding more features to the towers. Well, that's all I have for you now. I guess I can't really call this episode 9 of the Sanctia Devlog, so instead, I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Towns and Towers. Love you guys, but it's time for me to get the fuck out of here and keep working. Probably do some unpacking. Still haven't found the box with my pants. Future problem. Thank you all very much, and see you next time.